Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Sheer, your AEC Tech Girl and Autodesk Expert Elite. Now, I know I've been MIA for some time, but what a better way to dive back into creating content for you than with the Revit 2027 release. And okay, I'm gonna say something a little bit controversial here. Revit 2027 might be one of the most important releases we've had in years. And not because of some flashy new features or improvements, but because Autodesk just quietly changed how we're going to interact with Revit forever. And it starts with AI. Let's go. So let's start with this new sample file. By the way, there's this new Explore New Feature tip that appears when you open Revit 2027 that shows you some of the new features, and you can click to learn more about them if you want. So definitely check that out. But let's go to that new sample file. We're going to go up here and switch over so that we can click File, Open, and Sample Files. So the new sample file is the Pacific Continental Residential. I know we know all of the snow den towers, so this is going to be something nice and new that's really going to showcase what Autodesk deems some standards are in terms of modeling, project setup, sheet and views. So it's a really good basis, especially for newcomers to Revit, to learn how to use the software. Let's take a look at the new sample file. So here we have the new residential sample file. I really love the way that it looks, and it gives us a nice idea of kind of the standards that Autodesk is setting. I'm not going to go too much into it because I'll be showcasing it throughout this entire demo of the new features. I'm going to switch over and we're going to start looking at the next exciting feature, which is the Autodesk Assistant. This is their headline feature for Revit 2027 because it now has a built-in AI assistant. Not just a chatbot that you can open in your browser or this add-on. It lives right inside of Revit in its own panel, and you can interact with it using plain language. When you open Revit 2027, it should appear once you open up your project, but in case it doesn't, it will be in the Views tab in the same location where you would go to show your properties or your project browser. It would just be under the user interface, and you can toggle it off if you want to hide it or toggle it back on if you want to see it. Now, under the hood, it runs on something called MCP, or Model Context Protocol, which we're going to talk more about in the next section. But the important thing for right now is what it can actually do. So it can query your model, pull information, it can execute actions. It really has 6 tool groups in total. So 1 model query, 2 sheet management, 3 room management, 4 schedules, 5 exports, and 6 element operations. And it will be on by default, so there's really not much you need to do except start using it. I want to be straight with you here because this feature is getting a lot of hype, and I think the honest take is more useful than a marketing version. So there are a lot of things that it is generally great for, I'm not going to lie, but it does have real limitations. And remember, it is a tech preview. This is the first release of the Autodesk Assistant in Revit. So be cautious with what you do. Make sure to save the model before running any of your prompts, and just don't have too high expectations. Some things it can't do, but some things it does do really well, and it is going to save you a lot of time in the things that it can get done. But this is version 1, as I said, and expect it to improve significantly over the next few releases. And go in with those calibrated expectations. Okay, let me show you some things that I've set up for it to do. At the top, you'll notice a few little icon buttons. 1 is the chat, 2 is the insights, 3 is your prompt library, 4 is your chat history, and then your settings. There's not much in settings. The only thing is to turn it on or off. But let's go into the prompt library because this is where you can save prompts or run prompts that you have already saved. This is really useful because from personal experience, the more detailed your prompt is, the more accurate results you're going to take. For example, if I just say color all my rooms by height, it is going to turn out something. But if I say color all rooms in this view that have the room name bedroom by height, it obviously is going to give me a more detailed description and refine what it's running the functions on. I may not want to type that every time. And if it's something like editing data that I'm going to be running multiple times throughout my project, I don't have to type it out every single time. I can type it out, save it, and then run it when I need it. So I've already tested this on a few prompts and I've gone ahead and saved them here. It does do some things really well. Coloring rooms is one of them, or coloring elements in general. Just make sure that the template is turned off in your view so it can actually color the elements as needed. So what I'm going to do is select one of these prompts that I've saved, and I'm going to choose to use the prompts. If I wanted to, I could have edited it, copied it, or deleted it. So let's just use this prompt. It'll then copy the text into my chat and I can run it. If you are using it for the first time, definitely try and test out some of these prompts that it's defaulting to ask you. But let's go ahead and run this prompt. Now, it is going to take some time. It's not instantaneous. It will let you know what it's doing, kind of give you some information. Sometimes it's cute in the way that it responds and tells you what it can do, similar to ChatGPT if you use that. So just give it a little bit of time and it will be able to execute. Sometimes it says that it completed the task, but if there was a limitation, for example, like if there was a view template on this view that was preventing it from actually showing the colors, it'll say it completed the task even though nothing really happened. That's what I mean by be cautious with how you run it, and there is still some human touch that needs to happen. All right, let's see what it can do. Okay. So if we scroll all the way down, perfect. I've successfully colored all 26 rooms in your project based on their room height. Here's the color scheme I applied. So it kind of gives me that information. Let me know the color scheme. And we can see in this view that it did colorize my rooms by the height. So I can see and analyze that, use it for QA, QC, or a diagram to represent the room heights in my plans. Wonderful. Next, let's try another thing to update the sheet numbers. So we can see in my project browser here, I have some sheet numbers and they're designated with a dash. Let's turn this dash into a period because I want to update how those values are divided. Now, I will say for editing sheet numbers and names, this works really well. Note that it does not yet have the capabilities to do it for views. So that is one of the limitations. All right, let's run it and see what happens. Great. So as we can see, it did update those sheet numbers using a period instead of a dash to divide those values. Wonderful. Really love that. So as I mentioned, for sheet number naming editing, it works great. It's one of the things that I think is a strong suit in the Autodesk Assistant. Now let's look at a way to edit data. The last example I want to show you is a little bit more complicated. The two I just showed you were pretty simple, but here we're going to look at something that I can't really easily do. I usually use a Dynamo script to do this, so this is a great way to kind of streamline an automation directly using the Autodesk Assistant, which is updating my door fire ratings from my walls. So here I have a bunch of doors and I have the parameter fire rating as an instance parameter, and I want to extract the fire rating from my wall type parameter to my doors. So again, I'm going to pull from that prompt library, and this has a more detailed explanation. Like I said, if I'm going to be running this over and over again, I don't want to have to type it out every time. I can save it in the prompt library and run it every time I want to run it. So here we go. Okay, it finally finished. Did take some time, but if I go ahead and select my door, we can see that the fire rating was transferred to that parameter. So it did work pretty well, and I'm happy with those results. Now, like I mentioned, this still is in tech preview, so providing feedback is essential to help improve it. I think that this could be a game changer in how we work. So providing that feedback is really important. I'm going to give it a thumbs up. And if you have any issues, if you're happy or not happy with the results, definitely provide that feedback to Autodesk. Okay, I want to talk about the MCP server because it's related to the Autodesk Assistant and part of the 2027 story, and is something that is really exciting in concept, but I'm going to keep it high level because honestly, I haven't been able to get it fully working yet, and I'm not going to stand here and walk you through something that I can't actually demo properly. So here's what you need to know about the MCP server. MCP stands for Model Context Protocol, and it's the architecture that the Autodesk Assistant runs on inside Revit. But Autodesk has also made that server publicly available, which means in theory, you could connect your Revit model to an external AI tool of your choice, not just the built-in Autodesk panel, your own environment, whether that's Claude, GPT, or something your firm builds internally. Really, the possibilities are endless. So customer reporting workflows, project audits, bulk data operations, all driven by that natural language, all pulling from your live model. That's a meaningful shift in how BIM data could move between tools. But, and this is an important but, getting it set up is not straightforward right now. It requires installing a separate add-in, configuring it with your AI application, and the documentation is still pretty sparse. I've been working through it and I'm not really there yet. So I'll say this, watch this space. Once I am able to figure it out, I'll do a dedicated video on the MCP server and how it works and how to set it up. But for now, know that it does exist. Know that it's the infrastructure underneath everything AI related in this release, and know that it has a lot of potential that we haven't fully unlocked yet. Okay, here's one that as an architect, I've been waiting a long time for. Revit 2027 lets you host one wall on another wall. If you've ever worked with a core and finish wall setup, structural concrete with a finish layer on the inside face, or a partition wall that's supposed to track against a structural backing, you know exactly why this matters. So first we're going to go to creating a wall. And then we're going to go to place by room. Now, this is a fairly new feature that came out in the last release. So it's okay if you don't know much about it. But once you do that, you're able to select hosted wall. This is what is new, and it is really exciting. Now, with placing by room, we have a few options with interior, exterior sides, height and depth, and everything else that you can customize. But once we do that, we can then, for example, pick this room, and I have my tile finish, and it automatically places the wall around the room. And now that wall is hosted to the other wall. I can even pick a new host so we can see that. And as I move my wall, both walls move with it. We also have this option for place by segment, another newer feature, and it works the same way. We can select hosted wall and simply select the wall we want to host it to. If we wanted to do just an individual wall and not an entire room. And again, as I select to move those walls, the wall that's hosted on it will move with it. We also have the option to remove the hosted relationship. And in that case, it will go back to being independent. Okay, let's talk about tagging now. It's not the sexiest feature to talk about, but if you spend any real time in construction documents, and as architects, we definitely live in our CDs, this update is going to feel really nice. There's three things that change, and all three address frustrations that have been around for a long time. First is leader control. So if you select a tag and add your leader line, you might notice something new. There are these clips that you can use to clip your leaders. This will allow me to change the start and end of that leader location. If I clip it back, it'll go to the center, but this allows me to move it around freely as needed. And when I move the tag, it stays relative to that. Here's another example where it will be on both ends. So again, I'm going to turn on that leader, and here we can see that as I unpin it, I can move that around and even move it around at the end as well, or the start, whichever you want to call that. So I can pin it to the edge of the door frame and move my tag as needed. We can also change those settings here, free at the leader start and leader end. So we can do a free start or attach the start and attach the end. And you can see how they've adjusted. Second is around multi-category tags. So previously, if you used a multi-category tag family, you had to manually select that option every time instead of it just defaulting. So now if I go to annotations and I go to tag all, you'll notice that if I go to any of the options for tag all, I can, instead of selecting the category tag, I can select the multi-category tag. Same if I go to my loaded tags and symbols, I can again select multi-category tag. And next is a real quick one, but worth noting, is stair treads. So let me quickly just draw a stair so we can see this in action. Stair, tread, and riser numbers are now included in the Tag All tool. So now again, I can go to that annotation, go to Tag All, and we'll notice a new category, stair, tread, rise numbers. We'll notice as I select that, I can hit apply, and I'm able to tag all those stair, treads, risers. Next is the rule-based numbering. Now, this is definitely an A+ feature. It solves some real problems that we have been begging Autodesk for. This you can find in the Manage tab under Numbering. So here I've already created a template. You can do this by selecting the plus to create a new template, duplicating, renaming, and deleting, and then moving them around, which will add to the order in which they run when you hit enable. So right now I don't have this running, and this is great when you first set it up. So for the door numbering that I've created, you first want to define it with a filter. So you can select from the Revit rule-based filters in the project. You can go and create new rule-based filters if you don't have one that already exists. This is really good for defining it exactly what you want numbering. And then of course, selecting the parameter. If a parameter doesn't exist, again, you have a button right here that goes to your project parameters to create new ones. There's no note. Next, I would first go to the numbering format. So I would come in here and set up my numbering format. Now for these doors, I want to do the 2-room number. Let's start at the top, where you can the first number in the sequence. the showing the number values as numbers, and then select the minimum digit count. Number labeling format, you can select from any of these parameters: common parameters, door parameters, from, and then 2-room parameters. So when I select 2-room, that's where I got the 2-room number. So I'm going to hit the 2-room. I added a prefix of D for my doors, and then just a number sequence that comes back to this. Now that I have my numbering off, I can then take a look at partitioning or element matching. I didn't select anything for my element matching, but I did want to partition it. This refers to the fact that if there's multiple doors in a room, it will sequence through them. So again, we're just going to select one or several parameters to define the numbering partition. Elements whose parameter values are equal will be assigned the same partition, and their numbers will be part of the same sequence. So again, that same parameter, the 2-room number. Again, we can select and filter down here and then find our 2-room number. Once that is all set up, I can click OK. Before they do that, I want to enable it. This is going to maintain that automatic numbering going forward. As long as this is enabled, it's always going to run that check. Hit apply, and we can see that my door numbers did get updated. What is great is we'll notice that as things change, our design changes. For example, let's say I'm going to add a door to this room. We can see that it automatically took the sequencing because it was enabled. So we have D091, D092, because this is bedroom 09, and this got D093. Next one is for those of you working in sustainable design or firms with any kind of embodied carbon reporting requirement, which is increasingly everyone. So Revit 2027 adds a dedicated carbon asset in the materials window. So if you go to manage and materials, this is where you can search your material database. So let's say, for example, I wanted to work with concrete. I can select my concrete masonry units, and you'll see a new carbon tab. This will be available at the top here. You can select that plus sign, and you'll be able to add and modify that new tab. Here you can then search from the asset database to add your carbon asset. Simply double click and you'll see that it's added. Now, if it is an EC3 building transparency or part of the EC3 building transparency database, you'll see that it'll automatically populate that information here. You can also filter your material library by those that have carbon. Now, I don't know why it's showing up on my other screen, but if you select this, you'll be able to then select show with carbon or show without carbon. So here I can show with carbon, and we can see which material has a carbon asset, and it's also indicated with this icon here. Now, there are a few things to know. The out-of-the-box Revit material library don't have carbon data pre-populated yet, so you'll need to assign it yourself or add custom values for materials that aren't in EC3. And the integration with Forma Carbon Insight is not complete in this release, so this is pretty much the foundation, not the finished pipeline. But it is the right foundation. Getting embodied carbon data into the authoring environment at the material level in the model itself is where this needs to live. And that's exactly where Autodesk is putting it. One of the last things I want to talk about is the accelerated graphics, which was introduced in Revit 2026 as a tech preview. It used your GPU to speed up navigation in complex models, but it had enough capability gaps that most teams weren't comfortable relying on it in production. But in 2027, it did graduate. It's now a fully supported feature compatible with graphic override, transparency, halftone, and linked models. It works in every view type, not just 3D, but floor plan, sections, elevations, basically everything. The performance difference is real, and Autodesk has published a benchmark showing walkthrough playback in a large model dropping from over 3 minutes down to 38 seconds with accelerated graphics on. So make sure to check this out. And one thing to know is some view options are still really not fully supported, like shadows, and in floor plan views, activating it removes line thickness. So it's not a blanket replacement for all your visual workflows, but for model navigation and review, it's basically ready. One other thing to mention, Revit also migrated to .NET 10 in this release, which is doing a lot of quiet work behind the scenes on memory management and multi-threading. If you've ever watched Revit lock up during a sync on a large cloud model, this is part of that answer. Before I wrap, let's be clear about what's still in tech preview because there are a couple of things in 2027 that are exciting but not ready for your production workflow yet. We mentioned this, the Autodesk Assistant. And yes, it's available out of the box, but Autodesk is treating it as a preview feature. Expect the capabilities to expand and the reliability to improve with every update. Use it, experiment with it, submit feedback through the product. That feedback loop actually matters. And the other thing is the Forma Connected Client. This is the integration between Revit and Forma Site Design. That gives you access to geolocated scenarios, environmental data sets, and analysis tools like wind studies directly inside Revit. It's generally exciting, and I'll be doing a dedicated video on it, but it's still in tech preview. What we can see is that Autodesk is pointing clearly towards where the platform is going with these tech previews, and they're letting us in early. That's useful. Just don't mistake available to try for ready for production. All right, that's Revit 2027. And honestly, I think this release is the beginning of something way bigger. The AI features are version 1, the MCP infrastructure is early for sure, and the Forma integration is still being built out. But the practical stuff, the hosted walls, the rule-based numberings, tag leader control, the accelerated graphics, those are real improvements to real workflows. So my take, definitely upgrade, especially if you're on large projects where the performance gains from the .NET 10 and the accelerated graphics will matter. The AI features, sure, you can think of them as a bonus, but they aren't the reason to upgrade. The other practical improvements absolutely are. Now, I do want to hear from you in the comments. Have you tried the Autodesk Assistant? What do you like? What don't you like? What worked? What didn't work? And what features are you most excited about in this release? Let me know. If this was useful, like and subscribe. And remember, stay empowered, stay inspired, and always challenge what is possible.